Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Amanda Cameron, and I'm a Quality and Food Safety Specialist here at Perennia. Thank you for joining us to learn how to navigate pain points for improving food safety culture. Our guest speakers today are Tia and Jill from Catalyst. After working in the food safety and quality world for different large and small companies, Tia and Jill struck out on their own, founding Catalyst LLC in 2021 to improve the well-being and effectiveness of food safety professionals. They are the leading providers of a coaching-based program for developing, growing, engaging, and retaining technical leaders and teams to drive food safety culture to ensure food safety and quality are strategically integrated within the organization. Their clients can be found across top retailers and manufacturers and in startup companies in dairy, poultry, meat, produce, meals, baby food, snacks, beverages, and grains. Tia and Jill have spoken at a variety of industry events, such as the Food Safety Tech Consortium, Southern California IFT, and Pennsylvania IASP. They've been guests on various podcasts, including Food Safety Matters, Food Grads, and Meeting Place. They've hosted and been guests on numerous industry webinars and have written articles for Food Safety Magazine, QA and Food Safety Magazine, and Food Safety Tech. You can find Tia and Jill every Wednesday at noon hosting their LinkedIn live show, Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill. For those of you who may not be familiar with Perennia, we are a provincial development agency with the mission to support growth, transformation, and economic development in Nova Scotia's agriculture, seafood, and food and beverage sectors. We have a diverse team of specialists in a variety of areas, including agriculture, quality, and food safety, product development and commercialization, lab services, and fish and seafood. Our number one goal is to help food-related companies grow and take advantage of new opportunities. This webinar is offered by Perennia Food and Agriculture Corporation with the funding support of the Food Ventures Program. The Food Ventures Program provides financial support for the acceleration of innovative and safe Nova Scotia local products to market using Perennia's food safety and product development services. This program is for Nova Scotia registered farms and agri-food and beverage businesses with head offices in Nova Scotia and funded on the Federal Provincial Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program. It is a 5-year program. A couple housekeeping items before I pass it over to Tia and Jill. Webinar attendees are muted. However, you can submit any questions that you have for Tia and Jill for the Q&A period into the Q&A box. And you can also submit any comments you have into the chat box. There is a captions feature on Zoom for anyone who could benefit from the use of captions. And this webinar is being recorded, so attendees will be emailed a link to the webinar once we have it uploaded online. So I'm going to pass it over to you guys.
Hello, everyone. I am going to share my screen. All right. I believe you all can see it. Hello, hello. Thank you, Amanda and Perennia, for having us today. And as we get started, we would love for you to put in the chat, where are you joining from, right? And what do you want to get most out of today's webinar? We're going to talk about a lot, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions and your perspectives in the chat and also in Q&A when we get there.
And if you've attended a Catalyst event before, you know that we start everything with this clearing ritual. I don't know about you, but I've already been going for a couple hours this morning and I have things on my mind. And what we invite you to do with this clearing is just to pause and perhaps write down the things that are like that last email you need to respond to, or that meeting that's coming up, or remembering to go connect with someone about something. Write those all down so that your brain can release those and allow you to be here with us today. Because we know your time is valuable and we want you to get out of this webinar as much as you can. And we also know that by being present, you're giving us the gift of being with us and your fellow attendees. So welcome to this space with us today.
Yes, welcome, welcome. So let's talk about pain points. We see these type of announcements every day, right? Weekly. And these are pain points for organizations. Recalls, prosecutions for company leaders, bad publicity, right? It's all a sign that food safety isn't working. So raise your hand to yourself if you love a good fire from a recall or a product incident. No, I would imagine there's not many hand raised, like I'm actually putting mine down, right? Because while this is a learning opportunity that can strengthen a food safety professional's critical thinking and decision-making, when it happens over and over again, because organizations aren't investing in prevention, people get tired, right? And this is about culture.
Yes. And you've likely seen this data before. Gallup reports almost 70% of people are not engaged at work. So only 3 out of 10 people are engaged. And those are people that are working to do their part, to improve and be actively doing more at work. So how well does that work when it comes to food safety and outcomes and food safety outcomes, if only 3 out of 10 people are actively involved?
Yeah.
As you can imagine, it's not too great. And that's why, of course, there's been this big focus on food safety culture. Right? When people aren't engaged, gaps aren't closed, mistakes are made, and it leads to recalls, sickness, and death.
Mm-hmm. And over the years, we know that people's needs have changed. What you see right now is a report from Mercer's 2022 Inside Employees' Mind report. And it's fascinating and one that we think about at Catalyst as we help organizations. There's been this shift from this traditional loyalty contract or engagement contract where people were fueled by pay and benefits or this sense of camaraderie and engagement around pizza parties, right? Like we love that, pizza parties or snacks at work. That's something that gave people that motivation. But really, employees are starting to move into this lifestyle contract. And this is really all about well-being or whole being. It's about understanding the needs of your employees from a physical standpoint, a mental standpoint, emotional, as well as financial. It's outside of those pizza parties, right? Or those traditional reward systems that we've seen. We have to do more as organizations. And organizations that have proactively updated policies and systems and ways to support their team members have been winning this war on talent, according to Mercer. And you ask why? Because they have really aligned their culture to what their people need as support. And so when companies aren't able to understand what their employees need to be empowered and engaged at work, the symptoms of poor culture comes through. And that's the business risk.
And we know what that looks like because we've been there too. As Amanda shared, we've worked in big companies, small companies, mature companies, we've worked in immature companies. They've all had improvements to make when it comes to culture excellence. But we've also seen the problems that result in leaders not listening to employee needs that Tia just talked about, and that leads to gaps in understanding or caring. And collectively, those problems are grouped as culture. But culture itself isn't the problem, it's just the symptom. And that's why we founded Catalyst.
You know, we work with companies like yours to transform how people lead. So it transforms their culture. We're highly trained as technical experts, yet we serve as technical leaders. We became certified professional coaches because we realized that technical experts need to lean into new competencies to lead effectively. You know, one of the reasons we're in this food safety culture paradox is because most food safety people focus on scientific and technical aspects of the role. It's left people behind, which is culture, right? It's created gaps in critical relationships needed to support improvements.
And that's why we work with our clients to improve leadership skills through our leadership development programs that ultimately improve their well-being. And that leads to improved effectiveness and leading people and initiatives. And we always are happy because HR teams are thrilled to find us and work with us because we provide the solution for their teams to build better technical leaders so their organizations have better outcomes. And we do that through progressive, well-planned programs, workshops, coaching, and applied food safety culture work like you see on the screen.
And we know that coaching is the key to improving food safety culture because it gets different outcomes than what people have been doing. You know, we all know that training doesn't get you to the actions and behaviors you want to see. Yet every year, right, companies like yours like to check the box on training to be compliant. But you know, to improve food safety culture, you need more. We all know that. And the question is how to shift from training to more. The how is coaching. It's why we base all of our programs in coaching so that people can unleash their talents. And as you can see on the screen, here are a few results that come from coaching. All support culture excellence and the bottom line, which is important.
Mm-hmm. And after our time today, we shamelessly invite you to check out our boot camp. It's level 1 of our program, and the next cohort starts on February 6th. It's for people who are new to leadership, early in leadership, people who are looking to move into leadership, people without direct reports. So as you can see, it's really for all people who simply want to be more impactful at work.
So we want to start with today by reminding you that you are a catalyst. You are the catalyst to the culture excellence you want to see. It really does start with you. It starts with you saying the checklist isn't working, or we need to focus on daily practice of leading people. And when you spark the change, others around you see the light and they go, hey, what's happening over there, right? It's working, I want in. But when making a change, where do you start? You've already created this grand plan, right? Maybe. Yet you're here. What's getting in the way? That's why we're here today, talking about pain points.
Mm-hmm. So today we're covering 3 pain points that keep organizations from improving food safety culture. And the first pain point to dive into is food safety culture data.
Yes, that's the big one. So we would love for you to share with us. What information do you already know about your food safety culture? Right? Share in the chat, write it down, think about it. What information do you already have? And then I want you to think, how did you get it? And what have you done with it? Most people we know have completed surveys and perhaps have interviewed employees, you know, with big surveys, right? The big ones that you take every 12 to 18 months, as well as smaller ones where there's 5 questions and you're asking yes or no questions. Maybe some organizations have created some big overarching plans, but year after year, they continue to administer surveys, ask questions, but they find that much has not shifted. Why is that?
Well, this is where we always ask the question, like, why aren't things adding up? If we're doing the work but not seeing the results, what could that possibly mean? And sometimes it's we're using the wrong metrics, or we're using data incorrectly, or maybe our data isn't representative of the culture. And when that happens, it can often lead people trying to solve the wrong problem, which of course we know if we're solving the wrong problem, we're not moving ahead the way that we want to or need to.
And so when we work with clients, this diagram from Trends in Food Science and Technology gives us insight into why the data may not be working to drive the results leaders want to see. When organizations are asked about food safety culture, they often talk about their food safety systems in their outputs, similar to what you see outlined in yellow here on the slide. They may have food safety metrics like updating food safety policies or execution of food safety procedures, or maybe it's tied to desired outcomes like audit scores, inspection, non-compliances, customer complaints. And these are important. And as you can see, it's a major component of food safety culture, but it's not the only component or even the first step of the flow chart to food safety culture. The most common definition of food safety culture is that it is the shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect the mindset and behavior towards food safety through an organization. Do the metrics of completed policies or consumer complaints really tell you about the norms, beliefs, and values of the people within the organization? No, they don't. The entire left side of this chart is typically not included when we talk about food safety culture, which leads to pain points.
And here's why. You already know culture is ever changing. So yes, as Tia said, we review our policies and complaints annually, and we may have verification activities in place to ensure we're executing our food safety management system accurately. But when we continue to see failures in engagement and retention and speaking up and accountability and ownership, it's because the first step of this diagram isn't getting the attention that it needs. And this is where work needs to be done. We have to focus on the soft side of the company to define the type of company we want to be and understand the climate of our people. Like, how are people feeling? Are culture surveys and engagement surveys getting this information for you? Maybe. But the pain point is that most organizations don't know how to use that data to impact the culture piece of this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so typically the left side of the chart, right, is measured by high level metrics. So some examples we have on the screen: engagement scores or turnover, maybe even revenue per employee or absentee rate, or those food safety culture scores from your assessments. Do these really help us know what actions are being taken to shift each of these items? No. We have no idea what the company is doing to improve engagement scores or reduce turnover or improve those food safety culture scores. These are ambiguous and unclear on how we're going to actually meet the strategy. These are what you call lag metrics, right? We don't actually know what the problem is. We simply see the outcome. And so that's why we need to be granular. Represent the actions actually being taken to understand what's being done to solve the problems. You need lead metrics. So when you look at these examples of specific metrics, it's easy to understand what actions are being taken, right? The key here, how do we get to specific metrics? How do we know these are meaningful actions in solving the actual problem? So your food safety culture survey or assessments will not change if you don't have these specific metrics. And these metrics are specific to your organization, right? That's what's important. These are examples of metrics, but really you need to understand your culture and have specific metrics for your organization, because there are no one size fit all metrics, not for culture.
And so with all of this, right, what we've talked about is it really starts with collecting accurate and meaningful data. Mm-hmm. On this chart, that's the assess box or circle that you see highlighted at the top of the chart. And assess means more than just administering surveys. You know, to assess culture, it's about gathering voices. It's talking to people. And of course, it works better if you've already created safe spaces for people to share so that you get honest feedback. And of course, as you create strategy to engage and include people, a new level of trust opens. So as you work the plan, you hear more voices, you learn more about the root problems, and you continue to solve the real problems that interfere with having the food safety culture you all want to have. And as you can see here, we work with the Atchison Group, TAG, as they are masterful when it comes to assessments for food safety culture. They deep dive far past just data with on-site interviews across roles, levels, and functions to better understand the real problems for you to want to tackle.
And then that data is used, is what we use this data, right, for clients to create this overarching strategy, which is most important, right? Once you get this data, what are you going to do with it? So creating this overarching strategy with tactical steps to shift how we engage people is important. And you're going to hear more about this in upcoming slides, because before you move forward, you need that support.
Mm-hmm. But since we're on this chart, let's talk about the last circle, because here's where people often get stuck. It's doing the work.
Yes.
Doing the work is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's piled on what you're already doing. It takes time. It's tedious, and it has to be the focus every day.
Mm-hmm.
So in food companies that have 100 priorities every day, how often does the other plan get the resources it needs to drive forward? Especially one that's around changing people's behaviors and those soft skills.
So as you can see, culture is meaty, right? Like it takes work to do. And that's why you need support from leadership. So we want you to share in the chat, like, who's still waiting for top leadership buy-in? We ask this question, we're a part of these conversations, how to get buy-in from senior leadership. Well, here's the secret. This is the Catalyst secret.
Mm-hmm.
Stop waiting. It takes you to move support forward. You can't focus. You can't continue to focus on the technical aspects and supporting your role. You can expect HR or someone who's trained in people behavior to take over. And spoiler alert, right? HR people aren't typically trained in human behavior. They're trained in HR processes and systems, just like we aren't typically trained in human behavior. We're trained in technical processes and systems. And so changing culture really does and can start with you. It starts with you understanding your role and engaging with people differently, picking up on those skills, right? Which we're going to talk about a little bit more later on how you can be trained in human behavior and how to interact with other people.
Yeah. And if we look back, long gone are the days of food safety just being about compliance. Right? Historically, most food safety actions for processes and systems have been driven by regulation and requirements. Like, do we comply? Do we have non-compliances? And many leaders believe that no news is good news, because what food safety professionals have conveyed for years is if we're in compliance, we've passed the audit, we've passed inspection, we're good. Well, food safety professionals now have to do more than compliance, and we all know that and have been working in that space. But we also need to convince leadership that meeting minimum requirements isn't providing the long-term results or even the short-term revenue and safety that we need, not only for our business, but also for our customers.
Food safety professionals, we need to do more influencing, specifically top leaders for support and buy-in. So someone in the chat had said their surveys often show a gap between senior management and plant 4 personnel survey ratings. That is common, right? Like, people are not mind readers. They don't know what you want, and they won't magically give it to you. If they did, wouldn't you already have the culture excellence you want, right? If you can just send it to them, right? If you're stuck doing all the things and checking the boxes, you likely don't have the space to influence effectively. Food safety people, we are notorious for using data and science and regulations to try to drive influence. It's the why, right? But we know that that's not working, right? We spent an entire week in our boot camp exploring and trying new influence methods, because it's how we get what we need to move from checklists to everyday practices. It's influencing people, money, resources to do all the things we need to do to improve culture.
And since Tia mentioned different influence method, let's look at a few. So when you look at this chart of influence methods, what stands out? What do you notice? The first thing I notice is that out of the 9 influence methods, rational persuasion is by far the most commonly used influence method with an N value of 270.
Yeah.
But
Why?
right? That's the why that we so often use. But when we look at how effective, or should I say ineffective it is, it gives us some insights. In the study that was done by the Creative Center for Leadership, they saw that rational persuasion saw high resistance, up to 47%. So when I use data and the why, I get a high level of resistance right off the bat. And in best case scenarios, the commitment for people to come along with us and do the work is only 23%. So when we say, gosh, this regulation says we need to do it, only 23% of people are like, okay, I've committed to doing it. So being a technical expert where data is king, this can be really surprising. This shows why just being able to show the data and explain the why is not enough to influence effectively. But now look at what happens when people use inspiration to influence. When we inspire people to take action, they are more committed, like 90% committed. That's huge. And they're less resistant. Our resistance goes down to 0, which we know is really like less than 1 because you can never be 0.
True.
But we get this huge shift in how people decide they want to come along, how they want to be part of what's happening. So imagine asking for resources to improve food safety culture. And instead of just using data and compliance, you sprinkle in some inspiration. Wow. Based on this data, it's clear that you're likely to have better outcomes, to have the buy-in and support that you're looking for and that you need.
So how do you influence better? You have to inspire through their values and beliefs. So do you know what your leaders value and believe around food safety culture? And we always get, Jill, when we ask what do top leaders value and believe, the number one thing we get, well, they value money, right? And we always challenge that and say, well, what money do they value? Most leaders do not get paid off of every cell in an organization, right? What do they actually value and believe around food safety culture? That is the task, right? One of the tasks for the leaders. And that takes time. And this leads us to our last pain point, applied practices for food safety culture. The tools and skills we need to do this work of influence, right? Buy-in. This work is different and it uses different skills in a different way. And that's why to improve food safety culture and see it practiced every day, you've got to start with building new skills.
So just think, the skills you're using today aren't the ones you're going to need in the future, especially when you are the one charged with improving food safety culture. And as you can see here, 44% of core skills are expected to change across the board for everyone in the next 5 years. So you are not alone in this. And if you're wanting to shift food safety culture, you're probably asking, like, what new skills or competencies may food safety leaders need to go forward? And that's a really valid question and a great question.
And we are glad that you asked. The World Economic Forum reports on the state of business, and they look at a wide variety of factors. And one in particular fits here, competencies. In May 2023, they published a list of the most valued competencies today and predicted what competencies would be required in the future to win in business. And so current we see analytical thinking, hazard identification, problem solving, root cause analysis. All of these things probably are just bringing back sweet memories of what you've probably talked about recently, right? Like, because that's what we've been focusing on as technical experts.
Yeah, that's where we do training, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. How much training on problem solving and root cause analysis. And those are important, but we have to shift, right? As leaders, we have to start shifting into what they call these future competencies that are needed around culture: self-awareness, compassion, inclusiveness, resilience, right? These are all new skills that we have to master. And when you think about it, right, when we heard that definition around culture, these kind of call out the things that we want to see when we talk about culture. And this is a new pathway for our food safety professionals. And even the best leaders, right, have room to grow because, like Jill mentioned on the previous slide, skills are expected to change. And so we as leaders, we have to change with it.
We do, because not all of us have mastered the skills to foster the culture that we want to see. But that always brings up the next question. Like, how do you do that? How do you and your team actually learn the new skills? Well, the good news is that the skills you already have, you learned somehow, some way. And so you have the full ability and potential to learn new skills. But it does take a few intentional steps. You have to identify the new skills and you need to learn them. And of course, you can't just learn them and then put them on the side. You have to practice, practice, practice. Practice them every day. You have to ask people to help you practice. You need to be in this space where you're using them every day so that you can learn what's working and where you need to shift. On top of that, you need to bring others with you. Because if you shift what you're doing, but everybody else stays where they're at because they are not sure where to go, you're not going to drive the culture that you need. So you have to bring them with you because they too have to shift what they're doing to improve culture. But like we said, don't worry. You and your team have done hard things before. If you're in food safety, we always say, we're here because we're passionate and because it's hard. You have trailblazed before. And now is an opportunity to get to do that again, to trailblaze ahead.
And like Jill said, you have to be intentional, right? That's the number one thing. You have to be intentional, you have to be planful, and you have to be internally motivated to do the work. It's the reason why we lean on coaching. You need to put it in the calendar and be committed to learn a new skill, practice the new skill, and reflect upon practice.
The work to learn and apply these new competencies that Tia shared earlier, like self-awareness, compassion, inclusiveness, curiosity, they're also learned differently than how we've learned HACCP and sanitation and allergen management. Right? Those are things that we read about, we do them, we have references. Compassion and inclusiveness, these aren't things that we're just going to learn in a day training or even a week-long training. That's because we're looking at how we change behaviors. It's also about how we're shifting our mindset to be more aware of these things and to be more intentional about using them. And that's why it does, you hear us say this over and over, it takes practice, it takes reflection, it takes digging deep, it takes messing it up and repeating that over and over for incremental growth and improvement, because that's what leaders do. Leaders find that pathway forward so that others can come along with them for the growth and improvement they need as well.
Yes. You know, in our last boot camp group session in December, our clients reported leadership was more than they thought. So for example, it's not just building relationships, it's practicing, planning, caring, developing new bonds. It's intentional. You know, before boot camp, they logically knew relationships were important and they thought they worked well with people. But after boot camp, they experienced deeper, richer, more rewarding, and more engaged relationships. And that doesn't come from a training. That really comes from coaching. And so we have found that coaching helps leaders carry the load and truly works as a catalyst to get you to the food safety culture you need.
Mm-hmm. And it also means that you, your team, and our professionals, we need to fill this gap if we want to improve food safety culture. And so once again, it goes back to that intentional planning. And here we share with you an example of that journey. The new competencies aren't just a checkbox for compliance. Once again, it's changing perspectives, beliefs, and mindsets, and how we work together so that we can all raise up to a new level. It's not an easy task.
No.
Right? If you are already in leadership roles, whether that's formal or informal, you know that's not an easy road, and it's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
It really takes intentional planning. So why not map it out? Why not have where everyone's journey, even though it may be different, you have a curriculum and you have a partner to support this team learning and practicing new competencies, because that's how you begin to shift all of these behaviors and mindsets that lead to the culture that you want to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And mapping it out is important because at your organization, in all organizations, people are entering, moving, and leaving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people get hired, people get fired, people get bored, people get promoted. All this shifting impacts culture. And without a game plan, culture will fall through the cracks.
Yeah, right. And we're always focused on retention and turnover. Those are not only hard on our teams, but they're hard on business.
Yeah.
You know, and when we think about the impact that somebody has when they leave or come to a team, you know, I'm curious, have you ever been on a team, you know, that when one person left, the whole team dynamic and energy shifted?
Yes.
Right. We've been on those teams. We've worked with clients on those teams where they're like, wow, that person left and whoo, things are so different.
Yeah.
And some of that's just energetically what feels different, but this happens all the time, but that's part of culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so like any good playbook, there has to be a plan on who's moving, where, when, and how. This is where you need a solid development plan for every team member, because everyone matters. Everyone has an impact on food safety culture.
Yes. Yeah. And so take a look at these stats. You know, 70% of people have not mastered the skills they need for their job today. Like, just think, we've been talking about how competencies are shifting, the skills, right, are going to shift. Like, even today, employees feel like they don't have the skills needed to master their job. You know, 74% of people say lack of development is keeping them from reaching their full potential. Wow. You know, when we showed the engagement data before, like, it makes sense when you see this data around professional development and not having the skills. And, you know, again, that's the reason why we incorporate coaching into what we do, is because coaching is the key to unleashing this talent. This is why coaching is powerful in transforming people to move from, again, checking those boxes, compliance, to everyday actions that drive excellence. It's that left side of the diagram, right, to drive those actions.
Yeah. And, you know, just like in your companies, to unleash talent, to have this culture excellence that you want, you've got to work differently. Mm-hmm. So even when you think of people who you admire, who are like, wow, they really have it all together, like Serena Williams or Michael Phelps or Simone Biles, or even Oprah, or there's a list of people. They all have trainers and coaches so they can get out of their own way, so they can unleash their own talent and do things differently to serve them. They're very intentional about their mindset and their behaviors and how they're doing that. And that's really important. Because when you get kind of stuck in kind of the normal things that you're doing every day, it can be hard to move out of that. And we often see middle managers that feel stuck. You know, they believe that they have done it all, they have it all, they're where they need to be, that maybe they don't even need leadership coaching because they're doing things just fine. And you're doing great things. But we're at a point with food safety culture that one of the pain points is getting to the next level. So if we want different outcomes, we have to be willing to do something different. And of course, there is that old saying that if you're not growing, you're withering. And so by continued growth, you continue to put life into where you want things to go.
If you haven't noticed, through all of these pain points, culture is about people, right? And putting people at the center of culture, one person at a time, one leader at a time, is how you drive food safety culture. You know, you want to speak up culture or you want to engage team members, be more human with them, empower them, include them, create belonging. That's how you elevate the state of leadership in food. That's how you start to chip away at the pain points. That's how you shift food safety culture.
So here's what we've covered today so far. We've talked about how do you collect meaningful food safety culture data? How do you identify meaningful metrics that are driving actions that are solving the right problem? Not the high level metrics, but the ones that are actually driving the things that you need to have move. We also covered how you need to be the driver of change, right? I hope that message has come through loud and clear. You have to be the driver of change to influence effectively so that you can secure top leadership support of time and money to support these changes. Because if you're still waiting for them, you will still be waiting for them.
Oh, yes.
And lastly, the competencies needed for food safety experts to transform into food safety leaders that practice human-centric skills every day is a critical step in food safety culture improvement. Right? These three areas are how you move through the pain points, like Tia said. These are the things that stall food safety culture improvement efforts. But here's the good news. When you take care of people, they take care of your business. And that's not something we made up. That's somebody else's quote, and I wish I could remember off the top of my head. But I think that's always so important to know. When we take care of people, they will take care of business.
So out of all the things we talked about, and now we hope you feel that you are the catalyst for the change you want to see, what is the one thing you're willing to do today to move forward? And we want you to write it down. We want you to share it in the chat because we too need to be held accountable, right? When you share your intentions, it tells your brain, right? Like, oh, I need to be accountable to this because now other people know. It's a little brain trick, right? A little mindset trick. So share it in the chat. What is one action you're willing to do today to move culture forward?
Oh, I love it. Tracy says, use different influence methods to try and get better buy-in.
Oh, yes.
Right? Isn't it amazing how powerful having that data helps us understand influence methods? Love it.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Keep sharing. Keep sharing in the comments. We would love to hear them.
Yeah. And, you know, everything that you do, every step, every action is still moving forward. So, you know, once again, as Tia said, our final message, and we hope the takeaway that you have from us is that you truly are the catalyst. You can't wait for others to drive the change. You can't hope it magically gets better. You yourself, you have that power and the agency to take meaningful action now to move past these pain points that you're feeling.
So we thank you for spending time with us today. Please do us a favor, pull out your phone and snap this QR code that you see. We would love your feedback on today's webinar, what you liked, what could be better, how can we help support you going forward. And if you're ready for a catalyst and you're ready to lead differently, Jill mentioned our cohort starts on February 6th. We are excited about our next cohort. And so we do have a QR code on there. Please check it out. Join us in February. We will be ecstatic to have you a part of the cohort. And thank you so much, Amanda and the Perennia team, for having us and allowing us to share what we are most passionate about. And now we look forward to questions. And I will stop sharing so we can see everyone's face.
Like we had another thing that we're doing, understand the conversations that happen are all part of food safety. Very often in the leadership role, even if they don't report to us. Yes.
Ooh, that Freeman, that's like amazing insight. Like once you understand that all conversations, regardless of if we're talking about food safety processes, right? If we're talking about that project you really need to roll out, all conversations are a part of food safety culture for sure. Because those you can get some great insights just having, I mean, I get like ideas around how to execute just talking to people because they share their values and their beliefs, right? They help you understand what are the real norms, right? In spaces that you might not work in all the time. That's exactly culture.
It is,
Thank you for sharing.
and it's planting seeds. Every conversation you have is an opportunity to plant seeds for someone to take that idea or that thought and help it grow as well.
Yeah. Or even we talk about one of the modules in our boot camp is around creating safe spaces, around building relationships. Just those conversations start to build on safe spaces and building that trust, which ultimately leads to a stronger culture. It's all connected.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. That was so insightful. And I think everyone is walking away with some tools in their tool belt. So that is exciting for everyone. And we did have one question in the Q&A box. So how do you inspire someone to follow food safety? She just needed a little clarification on how that can look. Give me an example.
Yeah, that's a really good question. How do you inspire someone to follow food safety? Well, I would say that you're not really inspiring them to follow food safety. You are helping them connect their values and their beliefs to the work that they do every day, which includes food safety. And so what I would do, and some of the things that we talk about in our boot camp, is starting with understanding what do people value and believe. Just starting there, because now you can start to, after you understand that, you can then start to tie those values and beliefs to the work that you do. So one great example I love to share is I had a mechanic and I worked in a facility on the plant floor. And one of the things that people said about this mechanic is that they don't really care about what's happening on the floor. They don't really care about their job. They're just so difficult. Well, when I hear that, I think, ooh, I need to figure out what do they value and believe. And when, to Freeman's point, right, I started having different conversations with this person. Well, what I found out is that this person cared so deeply. As a matter of fact, they cared so deeply because their grandkids ate the product that we produced at our facility. And so it was very important to this mechanic that the product was right every single time, because he doesn't know which product his grandkid is going to get, but he knows that they eat them almost every day. And so now I have his value, right? I know why he shows up every day to work. So when I need to roll out new PMs, right? I have this big project that I need to roll out and I need maintenance support. That's what I talked about. I talked about how this project was going to help produce a safer product or more quality consistent product. And that will help his grandchild enjoy our product even more. It will help his grandchild not to get sick or to have a terrible experience because there's foreign material in it. I was able to tie food safety and the work we're doing to that value. That inspired him to be a champion of my project and to tell the other mechanics in the facility that, hey, we need to support this project because it's helping to make our product more safe and more consistent around quality. And I care about it because my grandkids eat it. That's how you inspire someone around food safety. It's really inspiring them to show up differently at work every day.
Yeah. And
Great
sometimes
question.
it might feel challenging to go, how do I ask someone about their values and beliefs?
Yeah.
But here's a little secret. People tell you all the time in the stories and information they share with you. So when they come back from the weekend and they're like, wow, I had a great weekend. I did this and I did that. And I spent time over here, over there. Like, they value having time away from work. And so another way to tap into that and helping people follow or be engaged with food safety is to say, I know you really want to have your weekend open. So if we do this right today, that means we won't have to have overtime this weekend. We won't have mandatory overtime this weekend. We will get out of work on time. So there's different ways that you can tap into what are things that are valuable to people and tie those back to food safety. But I think the key here is it's about their values. It's not our organizational values pushing them on someone. It's finding this place where they intersect with what they find important and what we find important as an organization.
Yeah. And that, like you said, that's hard, right? Like that's the work. That's the work.
So another question. What are some methods to measure food safety besides questionnaires?
It's a great question. With questionnaires, it's really just pulling data from people. And how many times have you taken an engagement survey or even a food safety culture survey and you're like, well, in this situation, my answer would be this, but in this scenario, it's that. That makes it really hard because then people sometimes hedge and put it in the middle or they put it at extremes.
Yeah.
It's hard to know where they really fall. So while it can give a real high overarching gauge of perhaps where food safety culture is or engagement, the real way to understand is have conversations. It's about, once again, creating this space where people are like, let me tell you what's on my heart. Let me tell you what's on my mind. Let me tell you what I like about working here. Let me tell you why I'm going to quit. Let me tell you about what I think we're doing awesome, but let me tell you what makes me frustrated that I could go to break and never come back.
Yes.
When we start hearing some of those things that bubble up frustrations, those are the things that help us understand where people are at. So then we can create this plan of like, well, how do we start making action on that?
Yeah. And that's the work that we do with our clients that take surveys, right, and assessments, and they realize that we're not seeing any movement. We help them really get deeper, right, and have deeper conversations so they can make meaningful metrics. So when people ask us like, what are those metrics for food safety culture? Well, it's so specific to your organization. What are you struggling with around culture at your organization? Is it leadership development? Do you not have the right skills for your leaders? Well, that means you probably need a metric like one of the examples we showed on the percent of leaders that have completed, right, the first level of their leadership development. That is a culture metric. We're so used to consumer complaints are 4.9. We need to get it down to a 3.2, or, our audit score, we need it to be above 90. We're so used to those type of metrics that sometimes it's hard to stretch outside of those and identify other metrics that do measure culture. And, we're just not used to it, right? We're so used to those type of metrics. And it's one of the reasons why we created Catalyst, is to help the organization step outside of what we normally do so we can have a meaningful impact to culture. Great question.
What are some things you have seen companies do to recognize and reward employees for instilling positive food safety culture at their companies?
Gosh, right, there's a variety of things. One thing I see often is pizza parties. But I'm really going to challenge people to say, are pizza parties effective?
Yeah.
Like, can we go further? And really what this is asking is what's important to people that you work with. And once again, this is the part that takes work. It's easy to be like, order pizza for everybody. Yay! What's harder is to go, Tia, what's meaningful for you that I can do to show you that I appreciate you every day? Amanda, what is it that would bring you joy that I can offer because you bring us joy every day as well by being here and doing X, Y, Z?
A little personalization. Yeah.
It does. It is. It's understanding what that is. And, sometimes, once again, that does take work. But that's where we really challenge leaders to think about, how do we go maybe from pizza parties to the next level? How do we get to the next level? Once again, it's not something that happens overnight, but when you do it, it is so meaningful to individuals that you're going to know because they're going to show you how much they appreciate that personalization.
Yeah. And you'll come up with ideas, right? Like one great thing that worked in one of my facilities is that the quality manager, everyone knew the quality manager because they had this very fun personality. They were very funny. No matter what, we were always laughing. Like people knew the food safety and quality group. If we're around, they're going to hear some laughter. And so what we did was capitalize on that, right? Because people loved it. So we actually made little money with our manager's face on it and handed it out in the facility to people who were doing great jobs around food safety. And so you might get this manager buck, it was her name, Bucks. You would get it if someone saw you doing something great around food safety. Now that worked for our facility because of our manager's personality, right? And that was tied within the culture of our organization. It might not work where you are, right? Because everyone's like, who is this manager, right? Like, have they built a relationship? So to Jill's point, really understanding your culture is the first step. Understanding your people, how would they like to be recognized, right? A lot of times people don't want I'm going to introduce you to all 30,000 employees at our company once a quarter and call you out and have you say a speech. Some people are like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to be a part of that. So understanding who your culture is and then capitalizing on that piece, right, to reward and to recognize them and being flexible because who you are today may not be who you're going to be in 5 years. Mm-hmm. So keeping a pulse on that is important.
Wow, that's a very great answer. All right, I'll do one final question. So when implementing GFSI programs in small companies, we have the mindset, we've done it this way for 50 plus years. Why do we have to change now? Like, how do you approach that to foster this new sense of food safety culture?
Oh, yes. We're smiling because
yeah, we have a lot of those clients too.
Not even in small companies, right? Large companies. Well, we've been doing this, or, I've worked here for X amount of years. We haven't done anything differently. Like we've heard this over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's once again, I'm going to go back to influence methods. How do we inspire people to see this new era that's coming for us?
Yeah.
How do we show people that we're keeping all the good parts that have made us this great and we're just adding in and enriching? Yeah. Like, what is the message that works for your team for them to go, oh, like maybe some people are like, we need an overhaul. So inspiring them that it's a new era is great. Yeah. Other people who are like, oh, I've been doing it for 50 years, be like, keep doing that. And then let's just add this one or two things.
Yeah.
So, but once again, that message lands differently for everybody. So it's finding out, like, what would it take? And sometimes it's just that simple. Like, what would it take for you to get on board?
Yeah.
What could that look like for you? Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to say, put a plan around it. Because while we do plan, do, check, act, or we project manage for when we put equipment in or new lines or product launches, sometimes the people part, we don't have as much focus on. So really put a people change process in place that understands what communication's coming out, what early adopters need, what lagging, people who are lagging and coming along, like what would it take to help nudge them or bring them forward or resolve some of the fears that maybe have them hanging on back in the old state. Mm-hmm. So putting a plan around that is just as important as, once again, line launches, product building, all of those things.
Yeah. I'll add because this person asked about small businesses. One of the things that we talk about with our small business clients is what type of growth do they want to see? Linking food safety to growth is important because that's going to be a barrier for them in the future. So one of the very first conversations, and I would say it's probably a little surprising to them when they talk to someone from food safety and quality, and we start asking them about, well, what type of business growth do they want to have? What type of channels do they want to sell in? Who do they want to reach? How big do they want to grow? And it kind of shocks them on like, oh, I thought I was here to get my HACCP plan done, you know, or the sort of the traditional, my inspectors showed up and this is what they said, and now we're trying to react. Well, we start with business growth because number one, that's a lot of times they value that if that's where their organization is going. So again, connecting it to values, but we also know it can be a barrier to that growth if that's something that they do value. And so connecting it to those values of growth has been successful to our clients because as they start with food safety and start growing their food safety, to Jill's point, it doesn't have to be all at once, right? Like how are we incrementally building based on how you want to grow your organization? And we've had clients come to us where like, you know, we've been working on our food safety systems. We got this great opportunity and we were able to say yes because we've been working on food safety. That's what we want to hear, right? And we are so proud of them and we are excited for their possible consumers because the product's amazing, but also, right, they're able to grow and connect with more consumers and spread their own mission that they're doing through their products. So that's how we like to connect it for small businesses. But again, it starts with what do they want to do? What do they want? What do they value? If they're an organization, they're like, no, we're good. We're really not looking to grow. Then maybe it's about closing the gaps that you have right now. How do you make sure that the people that are buying your products, right, are not going to have an issue around food safety or quality?
Awesome. Yes, I love the enthusiasm.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that there is some upcoming training for Perennia. In addition to HACCP training, we also offer some internal auditing. And we're actually going to be hosting a nonconformance webinar. So if anyone's interested in coming to our webinar, it's February 8th. It's what are your struggles? And you can ask Perennia specialists any questions about that. And it's been so great having you, Tia and Jill. We've all learned so much and we have so many new skills that we can use. And I think that this has been very valuable for everyone who's attended.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us, and thank you for, you know, being here with us and the audience and attendees. We really appreciate being able to spend this time with you.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Bye.
Bye.